We're out here at our Carmichael project, and this is the one we knocked down a number of weeks ago. You see there's a hole in the ground now. And we knew we had a groundwater problem here. We knew we had a groundwater problem, but frankly, we didn't know the magnitude until we knocked this house down. We had strategies in place for how we're going to build this thing to really mitigate and control groundwater and surface drainage. Once we knocked this house down, I have a little video that will show where I could stand on that dirt and get it to jiggle like I was on chocolate pudding. And that is not normal. So now we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get down in the hole.
All right, let's go.
Let's get down in the hole. Don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
We have a hole in the ground. We know we have a water problem. What do we do with that? Well, for starters, we knew we were going to have a water problem. So this has surprised a lot of people. Here in Sacramento, we don't get a whole ton of rainfall, but we don't get nothing, right? I think we get somewhere around 18, 19 inches a year. But let's start with a couple of fundamental issues. Regardless of what's wrong down here, we knew we had some problem ahead of time for a couple of reasons. If you were to look, if I was to shoot a laser, I should have fall. This lot should tilt from back to front, right? Because general principle, water sitting around the base of your house equals bad, right? Water sitting in dirt makes dirt mushy, not good for supporting a house, right? So generally, lots want to be graded so you're either managing how your water is moving on site, or conventionally, you would just want this, if you just wanted a quick and dirty solution, this lot needs to slope back to front. And let's run all the water to the front so it can get managed by the storm drain system. That is an option. However, if you have nothing for slope, it's going to stay on site, so you need to manage it on site. The problem with a lot of old properties is that they weren't designed with slope, nor were they really designed to manage water on site. They really just let the water hit the dirt and said, oh, the dirt's going to absorb it. Well, yeah, it is. Yes, it is. And eventually you can saturate that soil to the point where you cause a lot of damage, or that you, in this case, actually ruin the bearing capacity of the soil. And that's what happened here. If you're at all familiar with the area, if you look it up on Google Maps, you'll know we have the American River running through town. We have the Sacramento River running out by the airport and part of downtown. We have Folsom Lake. We have a number of sources of groundwater. We have a reasonably high water table, not super high. And so you'll end up with surface water, or groundwater running around. I mean, water does travel laterally in the soil. We're somewhat close. As the crow flies, we're maybe a mile from the American River, right? So that can obviously be a contributor to general saturation of the soil in this region. But we see those issues even 20 miles up the highway, away from sources of water, just from neighborhood irrigation. If you go into a neighborhood that in the middle of August is rich green and colorful, there's a lot of irrigation happening, you're prone to have some groundwater issues. We had poorly managed drainage on the site before. This was actually evidence where before we tore this thing down, we tried to do a bunch of investigation. What are we up against? The homeowners, when they bought the house, knew they had some issues with water in the crawl space, right? This was not a slab, this was a crawl space. So I actually personally crawled that crawl space, went around and inspected it in the wet season and found where soil was a little more saturated. And sometimes a giveaway, you can already start to see some of this kind of stereotypical, what we picture kind of desert cracking, right? Where that's usually a sign that the dirt has been very wet at one point. And now it is very dry, right? Because it's seen a very significant contraction as all that moisture has left. We saw some of that under here. So we had a strategy in place where one of the first things you want to do, right? And this is similar to just all aspects of building. We think about this even with how we handle windows, right? We don't want water to get into a window, but if it gets in, we want to get it out. Same with our cladding systems. Well, the same goes here. We want to try and capture our water. So one of the first things we try and do is we planned for a full perimeter drainage system. So if you can kind of picture this whole thing, you can kind of start to see the footprint of this house and how it's going to take shape. Well, imagine the entire way around this thing, kind of hugging the outside of the foundation, what's called a French drain system, right? That's going to hug the perimeter of this structure, and then we're going to get it off the property. We don't have enough land here to really manage our water intake well, and so we're going to leverage the storm drain system. We're going to grab it and then we're going to get it out. The problem is, if you recall, we don't have any fall from back to front. So how do I take drains that are all the way down here by my feet and get them up to the street? So what we'll be doing is we'll be taking drains, and this is going to be one of the corners, then up in that far corner over there, we're going to take those drains, kind of kick them both way around the house, and we will have sump pits in both of those corners, right? So that gives us a place to grab all that water, and that drain pipe is down at the lower level of the footing, right? What we're trying to do is water will come up, right? Groundwater can actually sit on top of that heavy clay soil that doesn't really want to soak up the water. It'll actually run laterally in that softer soil right on top of the clay. So we want that drain tile right down there at the bottom with a little bit of slope, and it's going to run to those sump pump systems. From there, we can pump it out to the street and get it to the storm drain system. But because we don't have fall and we need those drain pipes so low, we have to use a mechanical system. With that, we'll also have a sump system inside the foundation. So ideally, we want to start, let's take the water, let's grab it when we first can, and let's get it away. Right? So we're going to do that around the whole perimeter. The other place we want to do that is you think about how much water is going to hit that roof. And what normally happens, if you were to walk the neighborhood, most neighborhoods, go walk your own neighborhood, what happens? Rainwater hits the roof, gets to the gutters, goes down some downspouts, and usually just kicks right out. And so the reality is we're kicking that water a few inches away from the house. I did a project a number of years ago where the corner of the house had fallen, was it 4 inches and 6 feet? Because of a downspout that's just been for 80 years pumping water down by that foundation, right? Getting your downspouts, getting that water to a downspout 6 inches from your foundation is not solving the problem. You're basically pushing it to the problem, pushing it right where you don't want it. So we're going to think about groundwater that's coming up. We're also going to think about rainwater that's coming down. That's water we already have captive, right? We've already taken control of it. So let's not give that control away. That'll hit its own drain system. So as those downspouts come down, they will hit actually a drain system that'll still follow that same perimeter, but will sit higher into the trench. And whereas that bottom pipe is perforated, so water can come up from the soil, right? Your house puts pressure on the soil, and it actually drives water up to the points of lower pressure, right? Pressure wants to equalize. And so those pipes are perforated so they can carry water away. Our upper pipes are going to be non-perforated. That is saying, hey, we've already grabbed control of this water. We're not giving it back. We're taking that rainwater, we're putting in those pipes, and we're going to feed the same sump systems because we do still have the same fall problem. If we didn't have a fall problem, if this property could be higher, that we could drain by gravity straight out to the street, right? We love to stay away from mechanical solutions because what do mechanical solutions do? They fail. When do you get the bulk of your rain? When you also tend to have these extreme weather events that kill power. So there is a little bit of challenge there, and we have to kind of mitigate that risk and be aware of that risk. The owners have to be aware of that. But when we don't have fall, that's what we have to play with, right? The only way to fight gravity in this case is by mechanical means. So now if we've taken water up from the soil and we've said, okay, we got you, let's get you out. And now we're taking water down via rain to the roof, and we're capturing that and saying, okay, right, we got you, well, let's get you out. Water's still going to try and sneak up here. We have a sump pump system in the middle of the house. Now we've taken care of bulk water. We still have to be worried about moisture and humidity, right? So because we knew already that we had a groundwater issue, often we can mitigate it if we have a perimeter drain system, which we're planning to put one in. Now we've had to make it more intense. We were also planning to encapsulate this crawl space. And when we do a crawl space, especially, this is going to be a pretty high performing home. We don't want to put this very nice airtight building and plop it down on a nice little bucket of water. We need to seal that out. So fortunately, we knew of the issue, so we had already planned to do an encapsulated crawl space. And so we'll show that in progress, but essentially that means giving a means for some surface water movement. So you'll actually see this all get covered in rock once the foundation is poured. That gives some surface water that does release, the ability to kind of move laterally. And we'll have a sump pump in here that it can get to. But then most importantly, we have a vapor barrier. And that is a continuous, really thick, strong membrane, purpose-built for that type of application that's going to roll up the foundation and get sealed to it. So even should that dirt be moist, right, where we then want to develop humidity in the crawl space, we have that now locked out. But do systems fail? Yes. So both as a code requirement and just by wise building practices, we'll have a dehumidification system under this crawl space. It'll be an unvented, encapsulated, but uninsulated crawl space. So we'll have a dehumidification system down here, right? Should a maintenance person go down there to service a unit or something, and they put some little punctures in that membrane, we have that dehumidifier down there to make sure what we don't want to have happen is that still the stagnance of that crawl space develops a very different kind of humidity situation than the rest of the house. We want that all to be in balance. And so now we can control that. We have conditioned space inside. We have a dehumidifier running down in the crawl space to keep that all regulated. And so it becomes this very multi-part solution the unfortunate thing in this case is some of it was done ahead of time. Some of it really couldn't seem to show itself until we exposed this thing. And this is kind of the severity. Let's walk over to one of our more extreme situations, right? This is not quite a basement, but if you were to compare it to a normal crawl space, you have about 18 inches from the soil to the underside of your floor structure. That's your code minimum, unless you're going to do some alternate means. But in general, you're going to have 18 inches there. You'll see as I stand next to this pile of dirt, we're not at a full height basement. I'm not going to stand down here and have a whole extra habitable space, but you can see we're substantially more than that, right? So my finished floor is going to be up here, and we're going to leverage a little bit. But so the reason that had to happen, and this is one of the main variations, right? We took what was a solid plan from what we knew and encountered this real world scenario. It's one thing to have that water in the soil and to manage it. But what we ended up having to do is, of course, we don't want to just say, oh, well, great, let's let it dry out. Soil is a very, very complex thing that actually far exceeds my knowledge of it. But the first thing we did is we stood on the soil. I could stand on it, get it to pump, get it to wiggle. And we said, well, we need to understand what we're working with here, because what we're concerned about is, does that soil still have bearing capacity, right? It has to handle the pressure that's going to be put on it by that house. So in this case, we brought in a soils engineer, right? They sampled the soil, and we were very quickly able to tell, frankly, our grader and our soils engineer together, they didn't even have to run a lab test to look at it and know that it was completely toast. It has lost its bearing capacity. And there are a lot of ways you can approach this. You can dig down, you can import more dirt, recompact that, and you do what's called engineered fill, where we're basically building new good dirt that is incredibly costly. So there's a handful of other ways to reconcile this, but we ultimately settled on is we had to take all that dirt and get it out. It literally has lost its ability to support this house. And so we need to get down. Now, fortunately, I'm now standing on really good hard pan. Like this is good, solid dirt that's been approved by our soils engineer, that our grader feels great about. And we had to get down to that point to where now I can put a foundation on solid ground, right? We're not building foundations on sand. Fortunately, now that we have that, we've been able to leverage it to a few other advantages in the house that we'll show you later on. It involves some pretty serious pause, reevaluate, bring in the experts, and assess a lot of different options, right? A lot of options become available to you. Part of the exercise becomes, you can just start running with, wait, the obvious solution is over-X, import, recompact, do an engineered fill, and just run with that. But where we want to invest time is saying, well, what's the right balance of function and economy and our other goals of the project? Do we have to default to just the obvious solution? And in this case, we actually were able to spend time finding what is the most economical solution that is most congruent with the plan we already had in place. So we're not bringing in a bunch of extra costs to the project. However, if you ever had to truck dirt, it's really expensive. You know that. So that is still an implication on the project, but at least we were able to strategize a solution that was the least impactful, while also gaining a couple other cool functions that you'll see later in the project. I'm really excited for some of the wine cellar function that's coming into play, but that'll be for a later day. As you see, that's not here yet.